The morning air in the Galactic Defense Academy's firing range smelled like ozone and overconfidence. I should know. I was practically marinating in both as I adjusted my plasma rifle's targeting array for the third time that hour. The thing cost more than a small starship, boasted 17 different firing modes, and could theoretically hit a target from orbit if you believed the sales brochure. Which I did, religiously. My name is Vex, and I'm a Krell. That means I've got 4 arms, excellent peripheral vision, and an ego roughly the size of a moon. All of us in Squad Theta 9 did. We were the best marksmen from our respective worlds, the cream of the crop, the elite of the elite, and we absolutely, positively knew it. That's why when the human walked onto the firing line, we all stopped what we were doing and stared. She was small. I mean, really small. Maybe 5.5 feet tall in her combat boots, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore the same grey training fatigues we all did, but somehow they looked more worn on her, more lived in. Her equipment belt held exactly 3 items: a canteen, a small pouch, and a knife that looked older than some of the instructors. "Is that the human?" whispered Torque, a Mandarian whose scales shimmered purple in the artificial sunlight. His translator implant made him sound perpetually surprised, which fit the moment perfectly. "Must be," I replied, watching as she calmly walked to the equipment station. I heard they were sending one, just one, that came from Blix, a gelatinous Corvian who somehow managed to sound snobbish despite having no actual vocal cords. How generous of Earth. We all snickered. Not mean-spirited, you understand. Just the casual superiority of species who'd been playing in the galactic sandbox for thousands of years. Humans were new. Like embarrassingly new. They'd only achieved faster than light travel 60 years ago. 60. My people had been crossing the stars for 12 millennia. The human reached the equipment station and started examining the weapons. Master Sergeant Kroll, a grizzled Venturian with more combat medals than teeth, gestured toward the plasma rifles. State-of-the-art. Computerized targeting. Self-adjusting recoil dampeners. The works. The human shook her head. Carl's mandibles clicked in what I'd learned meant confusion. He pointed more emphatically at the plasma rifles. She shook her head again and said something too quiet for us to hear. Then she moved down the line to the projectile weapons section. The antiques. The museum pieces we used for historical demonstrations and cultural appreciation days. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Torque breathed. The human was examining an old kinetic rifle. And when I say old, I mean ancient. It was the kind of weapon that used chemical propellants to launch solid metal projectiles. The kind of thing most civilized species had abandoned before they'd even left their home planets. It didn't have a targeting computer, no predictive trajectory calculator, and definitely no SmartLink integration. It had a scope. A manual scope. The kind you actually had to look through with your actual eyeball. "This should be entertaining," Blix gurgled. Several others made sounds of agreement. Kroll seemed to be arguing with the human now. His translator was turned down, but his body language screamed, "Are you absolutely sure about this?" The human just nodded patiently, checked the rifle's action with practiced efficiency, and accepted a bandolier of ammunition that looked like it belonged in a historical holovid. She walked to lane 7, right between me and Torque. "Lucky us." "Hey there," Torque said, with exaggerated friendliness. "First day?" The human glanced at him, and I caught my first good look at her eyes. They were brown. Just brown. No bioluminescence, no compound structures, no specialized adaptations for low-light environments. Just 2 basic brown eyes in a basic bipedal face. "Something like that," she replied. Her voice was pleasant enough, calm, maybe a little tired. "Need any help figuring out the equipment?" I offered, gesturing with 2 of my arms at my magnificent plasma rifle. "These systems can be pretty complicated if you're not used to military-grade hardware." She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "I think I'll manage. Thanks though." "It's just," Torque continued, leaning over slightly. "We noticed you went with the projectile weapon." The really old projectile weapon. You sure that's Academy approved?" "Kroll signed off on it," she said simply. loading rounds into a magazine with smooth mechanical precision. "It's approved." I exchanged a look with Torque. His scales had shifted to an amused yellow. This was going to be a disaster, and we both knew it. The human was going to embarrass herself spectacularly, and we'd have front row seats. The morning's exercise was simple enough. Stationary targets at ranges from 100 to 800 meters. Standard accuracy qualification. Even the worst shooter in our squad, a nervous Plixian named Quiv, who had a tendency to close all 6 of his eyes when he pulled the trigger, could hit at least 70% of the targets. Commander Rath, our primary instructor, stepped up to the observation platform. She was a Corthian, which meant she looked vaguely like someone had given a tiger military training and opposable thumbs. Her reputation said she'd served in 3 separate campaigns, earned 2 fleet commendations, and once stared down a boarding party of Zinth pirates until they apologized and left. I believed it. "Shooters," her voice boomed across the range, "you will engage targets as they illuminate. Scoring is automatic. Time limit is 45 minutes. Questions?" Silence. "Begin." I dropped into position immediately, my plasma rifle's smart link syncing with my neural implant. Targets started lighting up downrange. The first one, 100 meters. My rifle's computer did 90% of the work. I just had to point in the general direction and squeeze. The plasma bolt sizzled through the air and vaporized the center of the target. Perfect shot. I was vaguely aware of Torque beside me, his rifle humming as it cycled through shots. Further down the line, other shooters were engaging their targets with similar efficiency. The range filled with the sounds of plasma discharge, energy weapons cycling, and the occasional satisfied grunt. And then I heard it. Crack. Not a hum, not a sizzle, a crack. Sharp and immediate, and somehow deeply primal. I risked a glance toward Lane 7. The human was in a prone position, her antique rifle pressed against her shoulder, her eye pressed against that ridiculous manual scope. As I watched, she worked the bolt action, ejecting a spent casing that glinted in the light. Crack. Another shot. I couldn't see where it landed from my position, but the target's light went out. Hit. Focus. Vex. I muttered to myself, returning attention to my own lane. I had a reputation to maintain, but over the next 15 minutes, as I efficiently eliminated my targets with computer-assisted precision, I kept hearing that crack. Regular. Rhythmic. No hesitation between shots, just that steady, methodical sound of chemical propellant doing what chemical propellants had done for thousands of years. "Time," Commander Rath called out. "Weapons safe. Stand up for scoring." I stood, confident. I'd nailed every target, most of them dead center. My display showed 98% accuracy. 2 shots had been slightly off-center. Due to wind conditions my computer had misjudged. Still, 98%. I was practically glowing with pride. Torque had scored 96. Still excellent. Down the line scores were being called out. 94, 97, 89 for poor Quiv, who seemed relieved he'd even hit anything. 95, 96. "Lane 7, Commander Rath said. There was something different in her voice, something I couldn't quite identify. Human recruit Elena Martinez. 100%. The range went quiet. "That's got to be a malfunction," Blix said immediately. "The scoring system must have glitched." Commander Rath's tail swished once. Slowly. That was not a good sign. "The scoring system," she said with exaggerated patience, "has been used for 30 years without a single malfunction. Would you like to inspect the targets personally, Recruit Blix?" No, Commander. Sorry, Commander." I looked at the human. Elena. She was standing at ease, her rifle slung over one shoulder, expression neutral. She didn't look smug, didn't look proud. She looked exactly the way someone looks after completing a routine task, like she'd just finished washing dishes or filing reports. "How is that possible?" Torque whispered to me. "She didn't even have a targeting computer." I had no answer. Commander Rath descended from the observation platform and walked directly to Lane 7. We all watched. You could have heard a pin drop. Or, more accurately, you could have heard a spent brass casing hit the ground. "Recruit Martinez," Rath said. That's an interesting weapon choice. Yes, Commander. Mind if I ask why you chose a manually operated kinetic rifle over standard-issue plasma weapons? Elena's expression didn't change. I'm more familiar with this platform, Commander. I wanted to perform well on my first qualification. Where did you learn to shoot? My grandfather taught me when I was 8, Commander. He was a Marine. After that I practiced regularly. Competition shooting, mostly. Some hunting. With that specific weapon? Not this exact rifle, but the same pattern. MUN 1903, Springfield. This one's newer. Well, newer relatively speaking, probably manufactured around 2045 or so.
I did quick math in my head. That meant the rifle was over 300 years old.
The human was shooting a 300-year-old weapon, and she just outscored everyone on the range. Commander Rath examined the rifle with what looked like professional appreciation. This is not standard issue for Earth's military. No, Commander, it's not. But when I received my academy acceptance, the equipment list said recruits could bring personally owned weapons for qualification if they met safety standards and were approved by instructors. So I brought mine. Master Sergeant Kroll signed off after inspection. I see. Rath handed the rifle back. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. It was a terrifying smile, all teeth and predatory satisfaction. Shooters, gather round. History lesson. We all moved closer, forming a semicircle around Commander Rath and the human. Rath held up one clawed hand. Most of you are probably wondering how Recruit Martinez just outscored the entire squad using what you consider primitive technology. Some of you are probably thinking it's a fluke. Others might think the targets were easier in Lane 7. Her gaze swept across us, and I suddenly felt very small. You'd all be wrong. She gestured at Elena's rifle. Do you know what this is? Not just the model but what it represents. Silence. This, Rath continued, is how Earth won wars before they ever left their planet, before they had computers, before they had energy weapons, before they had any of the technology you all take for granted. They won wars with these, with skill, with training, with practice. But Commander, Quiv ventured, timidly, surely our modern weapons are superior. The computer assistance alone makes shooting so much easier and more accurate. Does it? Rath's tail swished again. Tell me, Recruit Quiv, what happens when your smart link fails? When your targeting computer gets fried by an EMP? When your plasma rifle's power cell runs dry and you're 3 days from resupply? Quiv's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. He had no answer. Humans learned to shoot without computers because they had no choice. And do you know what happened? They got very, very good at it. They learned to read wind, to judge distance with their eyes, to control their breathing, their heartbeat, their trigger pull, to make every single shot count because ammunition was limited and heavy and expensive. She turned to Elena. Your grandfather was a Marine, you said. Yes, Commander. Served in 3 deployments, won a few competitions himself. And he taught you? Yes, Commander. He said, if I was going to shoot, I needed to learn to do it right, without crutches, he said. Technology was great, but fundamentals were forever. Commander Rath's smile widened. Smart man. Very smart man. She looked back at the rest of us. There's a reason Earth's military sends advisors to train our special forces units. There's a reason human snipers hold 12 of the top 15 longest confirmed kill records in galactic history. There's a reason that when things get desperate, when the power fails and the smart systems go dark, the humans just keep fighting like nothing changed. I felt something uncomfortable twist in my stomach. It might have been respect. It might have been embarrassment. Probably both. For the rest of this training cycle, Rath announced, you will all spend 2 hours per week training with manually operated kinetic weapons. No computers, no smart links. Just you, the rifle, and the target. Recruit Martinez will assist with instruction. The groans were immediate and universal. Rath's expression made it clear what she thought of our opinions. Dismissed. Next formation is at 1300 hours. Don't be late. As the group dispersed, muttering and complaining, I found myself walking toward Elena. She was field stripping her rifle with the kind of casual efficiency that suggested she'd done it thousands of times. That was impressive, I admitted. Really impressive. She glanced up, and this time her smile reached her eyes. Thanks, you did great too. 98% is nothing to sneeze at. But you got 100%, with iron sights and manual calculations. Iron sights and manual calculations are what I know, she said simply. Give me a plasma rifle with all the fancy computer assistance and I'd probably score about 60%. Everything's relative. Will you really be helping train us? If Commander Rath says so, then yes. It'll be fun. You'll hate it at first. Everyone does. But there's something satisfying about making a difficult shot without any help. You'll see. I looked at my plasma rifle. My expensive, sophisticated, computer-laden plasma rifle. Then I looked at her 300-year-old kinetic weapon that used bullets made of lead and copper. They really laughed at your scope, I said. Elena laughed. It was a good laugh, warm and genuine. Yeah, they usually do, right until they see it work. As I walked back to the barracks, I heard talk behind me complaining to Blix about having to learn primitive human shooting techniques. They both seemed deeply offended by the entire situation. I didn't join in, because I just learned something important, something that would probably save my life someday. Never, ever underestimate a human who chooses old technology on purpose. They usually know something you don't. The next morning arrived with all the enthusiasm of a meteor strike to the face. I dragged myself out of my bunk at 05:30, my forearms feeling like they weighed 100 pounds each. Apparently Commander Rath believed in early morning physical training, very early morning physical training. The human was already at the training grounds when we arrived. Of course she was. Elena stood near a table covered with rifles. Not plasma rifles, not pulse weapons, not even the energy carbines we'd trained with last semester. No, these were all kinetic weapons. Old ones. They looked like they'd been pulled from a museum, cleaned up, and declared fit for service by someone with a deeply questionable sense of humor. Good morning, Elena called out cheerfully. Too cheerfully for 0600 hours. Everyone grab a rifle and a magazine, 5 rounds each to start. You cannot be serious, Blix oozed onto the formation ground, his gelatinous body rippling with indignation. It is barely dawn and you expect us to learn ancient history? I expect you to learn fundamentals, Elena corrected, her tone still pleasant but with an edge that suggested she wasn't particularly interested in debate. Commander Rath's orders, unless you'd like to explain to her why you think her training plan is flawed. Blix made a sound like bubbles popping but moved toward the table. I selected a rifle at random. It was heavier than I expected, solid. The metal was cold against my primary hands. There was no power cell, no indicator lights, no friendly computer voice telling me the weapon was ready, just metal and wood and mechanical precision. These are M14 rifles, Elena explained as we all collected our weapons with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Semi-automatic, magazine-fed, fires a 7.62mm round. They were used by Earth's military from the late 1950s through the 1960s, and in specialized roles for decades after that. Simple, reliable and effective. Simple, Talk muttered beside me. She means primitive. If Elena heard him, she didn't react. The first thing you need to understand is sight picture. Most of you have been letting computers tell you where to aim. Now you're going to learn to do it yourselves. She held up her own rifle, demonstrating the proper stance. Front sight post goes in the center of the rear sight aperture. You align that with your target. The target should be slightly blurry. Your focus stays on the front sight. Breathe normally. Then pause at the natural respiratory pause, which is the bottom of your exhale. That's when you squeeze the trigger. Squeeze? Quiv asked nervously, all 6 eyes fixed on Elena. Not pull? Squeeze. Gradually increase pressure until the weapon fires. If you jerk the trigger, you'll throw off your aim. The shot should almost surprise you. I watched her demonstrate. Smooth motion. The rifle came up to her shoulder like it was part of her body. Her cheek settled against the stock. Her breathing slowed. Then crack. Downrange. A target pinged. Center mass. She made it look effortless. "All right," she said, lowering her rifle. "Everyone to the firing line. We'll start at 50 meters. Take your time. There's no score today. This is just about learning the feel." I moved to my lane and tried to copy her stance. The rifle felt awkward in my hands. Where did my third and fourth arms go? I settled on using two for support, which felt unnatural. Everything felt unnatural. "Ready on the line," Elena called. "Commence firing." I raised the rifle, tried to find the sight picture she'd described, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil shocked me. My plasma rifle barely moved when it fired. This thing kicked like a Hovarthian pack beast. The muzzle jumped up and to the right. I had no idea where the round went, but it definitely wasn't anywhere near the target. Around me, I heard similar sounds of surprise and frustration. Torque fired 3 rounds in quick succession, each one apparently attempting to hit a different planet. Blix's shot went so wide it hit the berm behind the targets. Only Elena's rifle spoke with that same calm, measured rhythm. Crack. Pause. Crack. Pause. Crack. After 20 minutes of what could generously be called shooting and more accurately described as launching bullets in the general direction of the enemy's solar system, Elena called a ceasefire. "Not bad for a first attempt," she said. And I genuinely couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic or if humans just had really low standards for what constituted not bad. "This is impossible," Torque announced, his scales flashing frustrated orange. "How can anyone hit anything with these weapons? There's no stabilization, no computer assistance, no predictive algorithms. It's just guesswork." Elena walked over to him, calm as always. "It's not guesswork, it's skill, and skill takes practice." She picked up his rifle, checked it was clear, and handed it back. "Try again, but this time, focus on your breathing. You're holding your breath and tensing up. That throws everything off." "I am a Mandarian," Torque said stiffly. "We are natural marksmen. You've been natural marksmen with computer assistance," Elena interrupted gently. "And that's fine. Computer assistance is great. But what happens when you don't have it? When the power dies or the systems fail or you're stuck with backup weapons that don't have all the fancy features?" Torque had no answer. "The galaxy is a dangerous place," Elena continued, her voice carrying across the range now addressing all of us. "You'll face situations where everything goes wrong, where your primary weapons fail, where you're cut off from support, where it's just you, whatever you can scrounge, and the enemy. In those moments, fundamentals keep you alive, not technology. She paused, then added with a slight smile. "Plus, Commander Rath said anyone who fails to qualify on manual weapons gets recycled back to basic training. So there's that motivation too." The collective groan was impressive in its unity. We trained for 3 hours. By the end, my arms ached. My head hurt from concentrating so hard, and I'd managed to actually hit the target approximately 4 times out of 30 attempts. It wasn't good, but it was better than 0. As we cleaned our weapons, which Elena insisted was just as important as shooting them, I noticed Quiv struggling with his rifle's disassembly. "Here," Elena said, moving to help him. Her hands were patient as she showed him how the bolt carrier group came apart. "You've got this. Just remember, it only goes together one way. If you're forcing it, something's wrong." "Why do humans make everything so complicated?" Quiv asked, frustration evident in his voice. "We don't think it's complicated," Elena replied. "To us, this is simple. This is elegant. It's mechanical efficiency. No power source needed, nothing to hack or scramble. Just physics and chemistry doing what they've always done." "But you have energy weapons now," I pointed out, working on my own rifle's cleaning. "Earth has plasma rifles, particle beam cannons, all the same technology we use. Why do you still train on these?" Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice had changed. Softer, more serious. "My grandfather told me a story once. About a battle during the Third Interstellar Conflict. Human forces were defending a colony against raiders. Everything went wrong. Their ship's reactor got hit by an EMP weapon. Everything electronic just died. Lights, computers, weapon systems, everything. She continued cleaning her rifle as she spoke, her hands moving automatically. The crew had exactly two things that still worked: their backup kinetic weapons, and their training. 43 crew members holding off almost 200 raiders for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. They did it with rifles like these, shooting in the dark, rationing ammunition, making every shot count. Did they survive? Quiv asked quietly. 31 of them did. My grandfather was one of them. He said he learned something important that day. Never rely on technology so much that you forget how to function without it. Always maintain the fundamentals. The range was quiet except for the sound of cleaning rods and oilcloths. So that's why you brought that old rifle, I said. Not because you couldn't afford a modern one or didn't know how to use one, but because you wanted to remember the fundamentals. Elena looked up at me and smiled. Now you're getting it. The weeks that followed were brutal. Every morning before our regular training, we spent 2 hours with Elena and her collection of ancient weapons. My Mortines, M16s. Something she called an AK-47 that was apparently so reliable you could bury it in mud for a year and it would still fire. We learned to shoot standing, kneeling, prone. We learned to judge distance by eye. We learned to read wind conditions by watching flags and feeling the air on our skin. We learned, slowly and painfully, that everything we thought we knew about shooting was built on a foundation of computer assistance we'd never questioned. And gradually, impossibly, we got better. Torque was the first to admit it. About 3 weeks in, he managed a grouping of 5 shots within a hand's width at 100 meters. He stared at his target like it had personally betrayed him by actually being hit. "Ha," he said eloquently. "Nice shooting," Elena called from the instruction line. I might have been wrong about these weapons being completely useless." "Might have been," I teased. "All right, definitely was wrong. Happy?" The breakthrough came during week 5. We were running a combat simulation, live fire exercise with moving targets and time pressure. Half the squad was using our standard plasma rifles. The other half, including me, had drawn kinetic weapons. The scenario was simple: hostile forces, unknown number, fortified position. Eliminate threats, secure the objective. My team moved through the training facility, weapons up, scanning for targets. The plasma rifle team had already pushed ahead, their weapons humming, smart links pinging target data directly to their optics. Then the lights went out. All of them. Complete darkness. And with the darkness came the distinctive crackle of an EMP burst. The simulation controllers had triggered an electromagnetic pulse weapon. I heard cursing from ahead. The plasma team's weapons had all shut down. Their smart links were dead. Their targeting computers were displaying nothing but error messages. My rifle, however, felt exactly the same in my hands as it had 30 seconds ago, because it didn't have any electronics to fry. "Chemical lights," I called out, pulling an emergency light stick from my belt. The green glow illuminated maybe 10 feet around us. "Kinetic team. Standard sweep pattern. Plasma team. Fall back and reboot your systems." We moved forward. Targets popped up in the dimness. Without computer assistance, without smart links, without any of the technology I'd relied on for my entire military career. I brought my rifle up, found the sight picture, controlled my breathing, squeezed the trigger. Crack, target down. Beside me, Torque and Quiv were doing the same. We moved through the course methodically, efficiently, using nothing but training and skill. When we reached the objective, every target in our path was neutralized. The lights came back on. The simulation ended. Commander Rath stood at the observation window, her expression unreadable. Elena was beside her, arms crossed, a small smile playing at her lips. "Time," Rath announced. "Kinetic team, 7 minutes 40 seconds. Plasma team, unable to complete objective due to equipment failure." She paused. Let that sink in. "Question." Nobody had questions. "Recruit Martinez," Rath said. "Assessment." Elena stepped forward. The kinetic team performed well under adverse conditions. They adapted quickly, used their training, and completed the objective. The plasma team has excellent technical skills, but needs more work on manual backup systems. Agreed. Rath's tail swished once. Effective immediately, all recruits will qualify on both energy weapons and kinetic weapons. Standard proficiency requires 70% accuracy with manual sights at ranges up to 300 meters. Expert proficiency requires 90% at 500 meters. The plasma team looked like they'd been hit with their own EMP burst. The kinetic team, my team, just nodded. We'd already been doing this for 5 weeks. We knew it was possible. That evening I found Elena in the armory, cleaning rifles for the next day's training. I grabbed a cloth and started helping. You knew, I said after a few minutes. When you showed up with that old rifle on the first day, you knew this would happen. I suspected, Elena admitted. Commander Rath and I spoke before the semester started. She'd been wanting to implement manual weapons training for a while, but didn't have a qualified instructor. When she saw my file and my weapon qualification scores, she asked if I'd be willing to help. So the whole thing about wanting to perform well on your first qualification. Oh, that was completely true. I did want to perform well. I just also happened to know it would make a point. I laughed. Couldn't help it. You manipulated us. I gave you an opportunity to learn something valuable. There's a difference. Is there though? She grinned. Probably not. But you're better soldiers now than you were 5 weeks ago. Admit it. I thought about that simulation. About moving through the darkness with nothing but a rifle, ammunition and training. About hitting targets I couldn't have touched 2 months ago. About feeling competent even when all the technology failed. Yeah, I admitted. We are. I am. Good. She set down her cleaning rod. Want to know a secret? Always. Every advanced species in the galaxy eventually reaches the same point. They develop amazing technology, computers that can calculate trajectories in microseconds, weapons that practically aim themselves, and slowly, gradually, they forget how to do things manually. They become dependent. And humans? I asked. We're still new enough that we remember what it was like without all the fancy technology. We remember having to do things the hard way. And we're stubborn enough to keep practicing those skills even when we don't technically need them anymore. She picked up her old Springfield rifle, the one she'd used on that first day. This rifle is over 300 years old. It has no computer, no smart link, no power source. It's just metal and wood and human ingenuity. And it works just as well today as it did 3 centuries ago. That's terrifying and impressive in equal measure. That's humanity. She slung the rifle over her shoulder. We plan for the worst, hope for the best, and never forget that when everything else fails, fundamentals are forever. The graduation ceremony was held 6 months later on a clear spring morning that made the academy grounds look almost peaceful, almost. The various species families had shown up in force, filling the stands with colors and sounds that would have been chaos anywhere else but somehow worked here. My clutchmates were there, all 4 of them making proud clicks with their mandibles. Talk's entire extended family had arrived, scales shimmering every color imaginable. Even Blix had some relatives in attendance, though they mostly just pooled together in a gelatinous mass that might have been hugging. Elena stood in formation with the rest of us, that old rifle slung over her shoulder. Commander Rath had granted her special permission to carry it for the ceremony. A tradition, she'd called it. A reminder. When they called her name and she stepped forward to receive her honor graduate medal, the applause was genuine and loud. She'd earned it not just through her shooting scores, though those remained perfect, but through teaching an entire squad of overconfident aliens that there was always more to learn. After the ceremony, as families mingled and congratulated their graduates, an elderly human man approached Elena. He walked with a cane but stood straight. His uniform, though clearly vintage, was immaculate. Military ribbons covered the left side of his chest. "Grandfather," Elena said, and her voice held an emotion I'd rarely heard from her. Joy, pure and simple. "You did good, kiddo," the old man said, pulling her into a hug. "Real good. Your grandmother would have been proud. I used your techniques. Everything you taught me." I noticed, he smiled, and it was Elena's smile, aged but identical. Heard you taught a bunch of aliens how to shoot properly too. They were motivated learners. Eventually, I approached carefully, not wanting to intrude but wanting to meet the man who'd started all this. Excuse me, sir, I'm Vex. I was one of Elena's students. The old man turned, and his eyes assessed me with the speed and precision of someone who'd been evaluating potential threats for most of his life. Then he smiled and extended a hand. Sergeant Major Martinez, retired, though these days I mostly answer to Grandpa. You must be the Krell she mentioned, the one who actually listened. I shook his hand carefully. Humans were fragile compared to Krell, but his grip was surprisingly firm. She taught us a lot, sir. Things we didn't think we needed to know. Best lessons usually are. He glanced at Elena. She tell you about the colony defense? She did. You were there. 43 against 200. Yep. Worst 6 hours of my life. But we held because we knew how to fight when the technology quit on us. Because we'd practiced the fundamentals until they were instinct. He tapped his cane against the ground. Every generation thinks they've got it figured out, that their technology makes them invincible. Then something goes wrong, and they remember real quick that skill beats circuitry every single time. We understand that now, I said. Thanks to your granddaughter? Thanks to my granddaughter, he repeated, pride evident in his voice. And thanks to all of you for being willing to learn. Takes guts to admit you don't know everything. Talk had wandered over, his scales a respectful blue. Sir, can I ask you something? When you were defending that colony, weren't you scared? Knowing that if you missed, if you ran out of ammunition, that was it? Sergeant Major Martinez considered the question. Terrified, he said simply. Every shot, every target, every second. But fear doesn't stop you if your training's good enough. Fear just makes you careful, makes you precise, makes you remember that every bullet counts because you might not get another one. And that's why you taught Elena. That's why I taught Elena. Because the galaxy's a dangerous place, and fancy technology's great until it isn't. But a person who knows how to shoot, really shoot, without any help, that person has a chance no matter what. The crowd was starting to disperse. Families were heading toward the transport stations, graduates were collecting their belongings, and the day was moving toward its inevitable conclusion. Well, Sergeant Major Martinez said, I've got a shuttle to catch. Long way back to Earth from here. He hugged Elena again. I'm proud of you, not just for graduating, but for passing on what matters. I learned from the best, Elena replied. Nah, you learned the basics from me. You became great on your own. He nodded to Talk and me. You two take care of her out there, and remember what you learn. We will, sir, I promised. As the old Marine walked away, cane tapping against the ground with each step, I watched Elena's face. She was smiling, but there was something else there too. Determination, maybe, or purpose. He's something else, Talk said quietly. Yeah, Elena agreed. He is. Are you going to keep teaching? I asked. After we ship out to our assignments? Commander Rath offered me a permanent instructor position, Elena said. I turned it down. No offense to teaching, but I didn't join the academy to stay at the academy. So what then? She looked out across the grounds, toward the distant stars visible even in daylight through the atmospheric shields. I'm shipping out with a reconnaissance unit, deep space exploration, first contact scenarios. The kind of mission where things go wrong regularly and you need people who can adapt. Sounds dangerous, I said. Probably, but that's where they need people with fundamentals, people who won't panic when the power dies or the computers fail, or everything goes sideways. People like you. People like us, she corrected. I put in recommendations for both of you for the same unit. If you're interested. Talk and I exchanged a look. 6 months ago, we would have laughed at the idea of serving on a reconnaissance unit with a human who used antique weapons. 6 months ago, we thought we knew everything. Things change. When do we leave? Talk asked. Elena smiled. That smile. The one that meant adventure and danger and probably a lot of situations where everything would go wrong in exciting new ways. 3 weeks. Transport leaves from Orbital Station 7. Bring your kinetic rifles. We're going to need them. As the sun set over the academy that evening, I sat in my quarters, cleaning my M14 rifle. The motions were automatic now. Smooth. Practiced. I no longer fumbled with the bolt carrier or struggled with the gas system. It was second nature. Through my window, I could see the plasma rifle range, where new recruits were qualifying with their computer-assisted weapons. They'd do well, most of them. They'd hit their targets and feel confident and capable. And then probably tomorrow or the next day, Elena or whoever replaced her would introduce them to manual weapons training. They'd struggle and complain and wonder why anyone would use such primitive technology. Eventually, though, they'd understand. Because fundamentals are forever. Technology fails, computers crash, power systems die. But a person who knows how to shoot, really shoot, without any assistance, that person survives. That's how Earth won wars. And that's how the rest of us learn to fight like humans, one manual sight picture at a time. 3 weeks later, I stood in the cargo bay of a reconnaissance ship named Wanderer, watching deep space slide past through the viewports. Torque was beside me, checking his rifle. Elena was running final equipment inspections. Somewhere ahead, in the vast darkness between stars, was our destination. A system showing unusual readings, potentially hostile, definitely dangerous. My plasma rifle sat in its rack, fully charged and ready. My M14 was slung over my shoulder, loaded and maintained. I was ready for anything. Because I'd learned from the best. I'd learned from a human who carried a 300-year-old rifle and understood that survival doesn't come from having the best technology. It comes from knowing what to do when all the technology fails. It comes from fundamentals,